Wow, we got a full house. I am so excited to be here. Marie, thank you for everything that you have done. I feel in so many ways our journeys are the same, where you have this vision, you have this dream, and you have a love for your community, and you haven't stopped. And seeing your center yesterday was just so inspirational. I'm very excited about what's going to happen here. And it does take the power of we. Each and every one of you will be playing a very important role in your Family Justice Center, and I know that's the reason why you're here. And if you didn't have all these people in the room, you would not be ready. But the stars have aligned for you, and you are definitely ready to open up. So I get the honor to follow Casey Gwinn, and I have to just share a little bit about Casey, because when I did start my career as a public defender, he went on TV to announce evidence-based prosecution. What that meant for us is that for the very first time in San Diego, we were going to start prosecuting cases without the victim's participation. That was unheard of back in 1987. Yes, the late 1900s is when I started this work. And Casey went on TV to announce this new protocol, and I looked at all of the public defenders, and I said, who does Casey Gwinn think he is? I say we take Casey Gwinn down. I say we set every case for trial because there's no way he can win these cases without the victim's testimony. And sure enough, we set case after case after case for trial, and he started to figure out how to win. But even winning took a we. It took police officers, it took advocates, it took a community to work together. And I walked into that courtroom, it was case number 18, Allison, and the guy looked exhausted. And I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. He's so tired, he won't even know what hit him. And then he introduced himself to me, and he looked shorter live than on TV. TV makes you look like tall, like 10 feet tall, and he looked normal. So I go, he's tired, he's not that tall, this is going to be easy. Well, it was hand-to-hand combat for the next 5 days. I don't even remember exactly what happened. But ultimately, he won the case, and he did come up after me and ask that I join the unit. And I go, like, too soon. I hate you right now because I lost. But that began a journey of understanding what passion was about. Somebody who believed in something and was willing to fight for it. And Marie, I see that in you. You saw something that you wanted to have here for your community, and you have fought hard. You've had some heartbreaks, but you kept going. And that's what's so exciting about a Family Justice Center, because it's not about one person, it's about all. You need to have leadership, you need to have the partners, you need to have the services, and you need to have the researchers. So I'm glad that Chan is now part of our team as our lead researcher, because you have to evaluate what you're doing to make sure that it works. So history, because Marie asked us to go back and talk about our history and how it started. So back then, big glasses were kind of cool, as you could see. This is our small and mighty team. This is the small and mighty team that addressed domestic violence, child abuse, elder abuse, and Casey was our leader. He was our visionary, just like Marie, who could see something that people didn't quite see at the time. And initially, we wanted to have a Family Justice Center early on. And it was through that journey of prosecuting cases that we realized that we needed more than just prosecutors. This was my first elder abuse domestic violence case, and it was a case where the victim recanted and minimized, and she didn't show up. Eventually, she did show up right in the middle of trial. Ultimately, we convicted him, and she was that case that really opened up my eyes about a different way. And Casey had always talked about a Family Justice Center, but I don't think I understood a Family Justice Center until this moment, because it was case after case after case where we would start winning, and at the end, the victims would say one thing to me over and over again, and it was, now what? And I go, what do you mean? And this was Esther, and Esther goes, now what? Now what do I do about housing? Now what do I do about funding? Now what do I do about transportation? Now what do I do about food? And she just went on this long list because she depended on him for many reasons. And I thought at that point was, well, we've prosecuted. He's going to be on probation. You're healed. And when I even said those words, she says, honey, you don't get it. And then I kept thinking about that and thinking about that. And I said, you know, we need to come up with a solution because we got to help them. And at that time, our creative, or maybe it was my creative, innovative solution to domestic violence, it was a brochure. All we need is a brochure. If we give them a brochure where all of the services and all of the partners are, and then we just give them a map, it should be really easy. Well, as we went through this map, because we had to first figure out, well, what are all the steps that a victim has to take? This is the one from Sweden, but when we did our own, because I couldn't find our own, it was just absolutely daunting. The next thing I decided to do, and we did as a team that took 6 weeks to put together this brochure, was we had to figure out, well, where are they? Where are they located? And I actually even tried to go from every location to try to meet people. And no sooner did I meet people and get their address and their phone numbers, people changed. Their phone numbers changed. Everything kept changing. So the brochure really became unrealistic because we had to change the brochure just about every 30 days, which was close to impossible. So we realized that the whole system was very difficult to navigate, but I'm still very proud of the brochure, I just want to tell you. Very, very proud. I had my brother pay for the brochure, so that was really nice. It's interesting now that we do our focus groups, and in the last 5 focus groups, the brochure came up. And victims said, you know, we like the brochure. It's a very pretty brochure, but in a time of crisis and trauma, we don't want a brochure. We want you to be the brochure. And that has really stuck with me lately as we've been doing this journey. So it was 1989 when Casey and our leader at the time, which was Ashley Walker, she was our Marie. And Marie and Ashley had that same vision. Ashley Walker was the first woman in San Diego to provide domestic violence services in a shelter for battered women. And it was Ashley who tapped Casey and said, Casey, you need to do more than prosecute cases. And Ashley, to this day, is part of our board. So it is about relationships and bringing in more and making new friends. So it was 1989 when we proposed the idea, but it was a time that our time was too soon. People didn't see what we saw, and they just said we weren't ready. But we decided to try anyway. And I like to use this because it does remind me of where you are now, where sometimes the dream it's not ready yet. And you have to wait to when all the stars align. And the stars have aligned for you. And then once those stars align, where you have the judge, and you have the university, and you have the board, and you have the mayor, and everything is aligning, you really do have to go fast, because you never know when things are going to change. So our stars aligned, and eventually we opened up in 2002. But after our hearts were broken in 1989, we started anyway. We decided to start one partner at the time, and I think that's where it started. Dream big and start small. Never give up on your dreams. So we kind of got a little sneaky, as my mother would say. So we decided at that time is that if any cubicles became open in our work environment on our little floor, that we were going to invite somebody to come join us. And that first partner, thanks to Ashley, was an advocate. And then we waited for the second cubicle to open up. And when that opened up, we invited a civil legal attorney. By this time, our boss, Sue Hess, was kind of getting on to us. And then the next time there was an open cubicle, she was going like, wait. I think you guys are doing something a little tricky, sneaky. And we go, but Sue, we're just so blessed and lucky that the community wants to volunteer their services and work here at the city attorney's office. So before you know it, she started to make those cubicles available for us. And that's how the Family Justice Center actually started, one partner at a time. We also did a lot of focus groups, which I know you're doing here, but I would say continue to do those focus groups. They are critical. And here's what we found. I think Casey said we've done over 200. When you do focus groups with survivors before you open up a Family Justice Center, they say a lot. But the big theme is, will you hurry up? because this is really difficult and hard to go from place to place. Then when you do focus groups with survivors after you open up, they generally say, what took you so long? And so what made me realize after all those focus groups is that they are counting on all of us in this room to hurry up, but also to dream as big as you can possibly dream, because they need it all. So we've identified key themes as we've gone forward. And one of the things we also realized that we were already spending a lot of money in the lack of collaboration, the lack of co-location. Early on, we started to track our domestic violence homicides, and we were averaging 30 domestic violence homicides each and every year like clockwork. It wouldn't stop. It didn't start slowing down until we started to collaborate and started to co-locate. And as Casey said, by the time I left in 2007, we went from 30 domestic violence homicides in the early years down to 3. And in the city of San Diego, we had a population of 1.3 million people. To get our homicide rate down to 3 is huge. We are still aiming for 0, but it really took all of us to work together. The other key point that I would recommend that you determine your numbers is we determined that the cost of one homicide in the city of San Diego at a minimum was going to be at least $2 million. The most recent research, and that's already been like 5+ years, and this is probably where Dr. Hellman can help us, the costs now. But one study that I read, the cost of one homicide in the United States can be up to $17 to $24 million, depending on the circumstance of the case, how many people may be killed, especially children. Are the children being housed? Are they in foster care? And the list goes on. And then it was about 1995 when Casey became our elected city attorney, and he gave me the keys to his car, the unit, and I was in charge. And I was just hoping that whatever I do, don't screw this up, because this is really an important unit to him. We got to March, and he was appointed and working. He was elected, and he was in office in January. Got to March before I got the first phone call from the police department to tell me that we just had our first domestic violence homicide. And that first homicide involved a 17-year-old girl by the name of Cassandra Stewart. She had been stabbed to death in front of her friends. And before she was killed, she was choked. And that case never got prosecuted. And a month later, there was a second domestic violence homicide involving Tamara Smith, 16 years old, also a young mother at the time. She was strangled to death, then set on fire, left on a dirt road for her mother to find her. And my heart just broke, because she too had a long history of domestic violence at 16, with a history of restraining orders, dropping the restraining orders, parents trying to get them out of the community. But eventually she ended up coming back into town, and he found her, he stalked her, and he strangled her to death. And at the autopsy, they found out that she was pregnant at the time. And before she was killed, she too had been choked, and that case was not prosecuted. And it was in that journey that I will tell this afternoon that we discovered that the men who strangle are very different, that the men who strangle are using strangulation as their weapon of choice, because they know they can get away with it, they know they can intimidate, they know they can strangle and leave no marks, and no one is going to arrest them or prosecute them. So we have learned a lot since 1995 about those two teenagers, but strangulation is different. So we opened up in 2002, and now I'm going to probably speed up, because what Casey and I wanted to do is share what happened next. But if you stay the course, and we were able to stay that course with our partners, we were able to open up a family justice center with 25 partners on site. So this was our grand opening. I always show this picture, like, no matter where I go, because it was the only day the mayor and the city council agreed unanimously on anything. And it was the Family Justice Center. And I think when a Family Justice Center opens up, it says a very strong message. It says this is not a special project. It says we are here for you for the long run, and we're going to create a community for you and the children. So it started off as a public safety initiative. Our police chief and Casey Gwenda said, we need to do something different. So both of them committed their entire units to be co-located. 35 professionals from the prosecutor's office and 25 from the police department, and we opened up. You will see that our logo, which is similar to yours, is we said we were going to put families first and where professionals come together. That was our goal, to be a we. We had a very long journey here, and we'll give you a copy of this PowerPoint because it does take that journey of collaboration and working together and helping other people see your vision. And ultimately, funding came as we continued that course. Eventually, we became our own city department because we were afraid, what's going to happen when Casey Gwynn leaves? I call it abandonment. He calls it term limits. Either way you want to call it, he left us. And we needed to figure out how are we going to continue. And that's an important question for you. Right now, you've got the support of the judge. You've got Marie. You've got these amazing people that have all come together. But who's going to take this forward, and how are you going to create that long-term sustainability? So why Launch and Center? So I want to ask you, how many brochures do you have? Because that's all who should be at your Family Justice Center. And this was a center in New Hampshire, and she actually asked us, well, Casey and Gail, who should we invite to strategic planning to talk about the Family Justice Center? And we both laughed at the same time as we looked at her brochure, because I said, oh my gosh, because I was into brochures at this time, that is the best brochure rack I've ever seen in my whole life. It is beautiful, it is well stocked, it has everyone. And I looked at her and I go, that's who you have to invite. Everybody who has a brochure about their services. So we ended up creating a map of where those services were. And if you haven't gone to every location where victims have got to go, I would encourage you to do so because it can be overwhelming. And in fact, in my spare time, I teach law school. And one of the things I make my law students do is find out where victims have to go. I ask them to fill out a restraining order, find those forms. And they want me to always well, where is the criminal court? Where is the civil court? Where do I get these restraining orders? And I said, no, you need to go figure it out for you to understand what victims have to go through. And if you're ever going to represent them with your heart, you need to understand that piece. So we created that, and our goal was to take as many of those partners who wanted to come live with us to come live in one location. And as you can see, as these are all going up, we identified the core partners and we identified additional partners. And your community will have to identify who are the most necessary partners to be co-located and then what else. And once we started to ask victims, what else do you need? That list has continued to grow because they need everything from the basics, from shelter, as Casey showed you, the chart, all the way to that long-term community support. We also created a big vision, and it was so beautiful to come in here this morning when it was empty, to see your vision, to see your mission, and to see your guiding principles already in place as we are all working together, not only in the United States, but it's also an honor to be here with Pascal and Bert, who created the European Family Justice Center Alliance and have adopted all of our guiding principles. And now we're working internationally to figure out. And we're learning from you as we take things back to the United States. So first plan was, because we couldn't get everybody to work together, is that we're going to focus on domestic violence first. But guess what happened that very first week when we opened up the doors? They all came. Victims of elder abuse, victims of sexual assault and child abuse. So quickly we had to advance our plan to address all of it. We opened up at 707 Broadway, downtown San Diego. We started off with 3 floors, but within a very short time we realized if you build it, they will come. And then Casey had to go back to City Hall and advocate for 4 floors. So we ended up having 4 floors of services available. So what I want to do now is just give you a quick view of our services. So we're going to take a quick tour. You'll see this, and we wanted to share some of the way we started because there are lessons that we've learned since then. At that time, since we were the first Family Justice Center, the police department, they were all on board, but police officers like safety. They like a lot of safety and security. So we had to have bulletproof windows. And so at this time, we don't have that, but we had the bulletproof window. And the most important person at a family justice center is who? The reception. So this is Brenda. She was an amazing woman with a lot of talent in so many ways. But that receptionist is the most important person. Because if you are not greeting your clients with a big heart and a big smile, victims will know, and they will leave immediately. Our survivors also wanted us to create a facility in a government building that looked like a home. Not an easy task to put a little white picket fence and a roof in City Hall-owned building. So thanks to Casey, we were able to overcome that issue. Okay, so now you can see that picket fence. You can also see some of the paintings. Some of the paintings were actually done by police officers who were on site. So another big lesson learned is that you need to ask people what are their gifts and talents. Because the day we opened up, I was like the day before, I need flowers. I need to make it look pretty. My mom says if you're going to have a party, it's got to be pretty. So I'm looking for flowers. I'm trying to get people to volunteer. And all of a sudden, Jackie, who was our second receptionist, says, Gail, I know you've been looking for flowers like all week. You know, I can help with that. And I go, how can you help with that? I go, before I started with the city attorney's office, I owned my own florist shop. So I can do this. And I go, Jackie, I've been like pulling my hair for the last week. Why didn't you tell me? And she goes, Gail, you never asked. I go, oh, you're right. So Marie, you got to ask all these people what their talents and gifts are and see how they can help. We also created a big waiting area, like a home. Because where does everybody hang out when you invite guests? Do they sit in your formal living room, or does everybody go to the kitchen? So we decided we were going to have one of the biggest kitchens, all living room, everything combined. Also a private place where they can make phone calls. It's called the Old Public Telephone Booth, where you can go in and close the door. We decided that that would be important for people to make calls. We also had a quiet room for adults. We had a kids waiting room as when we decided it needed to be really large and big. And then, of course, now we have a family justice center that is in Anaheim. You should see theirs, and hopefully Casey will have a chance to go through that. We decided, listening to our partners, that we needed to have a different kind of interview room, something that was going to be very comfortable, trauma-informed, and a place where people are more likely to share their story. So we ended up getting a lot of purple furniture, some decorators to come in and professionally do that. We also, let's see, go back one. I have to tell you about culture, work culture, when people move in together from different work environments. So on the right, you will see that beautiful interview room. On the left, this is what you will see in most police stations around the world. It's called early government garage sale furniture. It's issued to every police department everywhere, and it's usually unmatched furniture, but there's a table between you and the person you are interviewing. So when we first moved in, Lieutenant Jim Barker moved in the furniture from the police department. And he says, Gail, this is the way we interview people. This is the way we've always done it. This is the way we're going to continue to do it. And on a side, they actually issued a fake restraining order against me. They had it officially served. And it says, Gail Strack, you are hereby ordered to stay away from the police department's floor. You are not allowed to put anything pretty, anything purple, anything related to flowers or anything like that. And I go, okay. And that was kind of a joke. But there was also the truth. And the truth is it takes a while for you to change from one culture to another. And so we kept that room in honor of Lieutenant Jim Barker as a memorial of the way we were and the way we are. We did actually have to do a study. You did enjoy this, Chan. Is that we did a study for the first 100 victims. We decided to let them decide. 99 victims picked the nice living room, and there was one woman who picked the room on the left. I think still to this day under very suspicious circumstances. I am convinced that Lieutenant Jim Barker somehow forced her into that room just to say that one person went in there. So we had an intake process that was going to be central. So this way we all knew and we can all coordinate the services. We did one of the hardest things ever, create one centralized form. Because what we realized is every partner had their own form. And we were going to be asking victims to say their names and fill out the forms over and over again. So we agreed on one centralized form. Then we had a client assessment where we had one of our most trained individuals, therapists, who would go through and just have a conversation to find out what brings you here and what services do you need. And then we would start providing services. The two things that most victims needed were civil legal services and counseling. Not only counseling for themselves, but counseling for the children. So we had the Center for Community Solutions on site. We had a chaplains program on site, Children's Hospital on site, our Domestic Violence Council. They were there as it was their number one priority to see the San Diego Family Justice Center open. So it was our number one priority that our community, our task force, was going to be on site. We also had a forensic medical unit, and this was extremely unheard of back then. And actually, a lot of people thought we were crazy. But for many years, we were providing sexual assault forensic nurses, and Casey and I just said, why are we not doing that for victims of domestic violence who are being beaten from head to toe, who are being strangled, they have injuries that are going to be very subtle, that they may not want to tell people about. So we did have our local hospital adopt us, and Dr. George McLean was the lead. He created a mission as to what the forensic medical unit was going to do. We also had 2 examination rooms, one for child abuse, and then the other one was going to be for adults, domestic violence or sexual assault. It was really beautiful. Again, staff at the Family Justice Center came and decorated it. We had a shower, so we were totally compliant with all of the state and federal rules. We had Home Start, which they were going to be providing counseling on site, and our goal was to provide immediate counseling as victims were coming in. Our goal was to give counseling to children within 72 hours of any kind of domestic violence that they witnessed or experienced. We had deaf mental health services. We had the San Diego volunteer lawyers on site. We essentially had 3 legal agencies. Anybody who wanted to be on site to provide the services that they were already providing. We had traveler's aid. We realized that sometimes that the best safety plan was to leave San Diego. So they were one of our on-site partners. We had the district attorney's elder abuse advocate on site, a whole team addressing elder abuse. We had the Union of Pan-Asian Communities, because we also realized that in San Diego, our community was very diverse. And if you want to provide services to a diverse community, you have to look like your community. And then we realized within about 3 months, we needed to have our volunteer program up and running. And so at the end, from the beginning, we had 0 to when I left, we had 120 volunteers. We went from 87 clients our first month to 1,200 clients. We eventually were able to pay for a full-time volunteer coordinator. And then we developed a team on how to do that. And so we have created a couple of books. The how-to book, which is Dream Big, Start Small, and it'll walk you through the volunteer program. We set very high standards, which this was really hard for us because at that point we were in a panic. We needed anybody to volunteer, just as long as they had a heartbeat and they just would commit to coming in. But thanks to the police department, we had very high standards, and that was a keeper. The higher the standards, the better the program will be. We had a whole recruitment and screening process, and we share this because I wish, as a do-over, that we started the volunteer program much sooner than we did, because then we would have been ready to handle the growth. Because not only did we reduce the homicide rate, we were able to reduce how many police reports went in. So for the police department that's here, we were averaging about 15,000 police reports a year, and now today we average about 8,000 police reports. When you give victims another way to get help, they will take it, because calling 911 and going through the police and going through the court system is a very difficult process. So the volunteers did everything our staff could, which I think at the end of the day extended our life expectancy, because they came in excited to be there, and they were able to do the things that we could not do, or just relieve us from some of the responsibilities. And that was our main floor. I'm going to go now through the 7th floor, which is the administration prevention floor, and walk you through some of those partners there. Initially, I was on the main floor and then ultimately went to the administration floor, so I was the director. We had an assistant to kind of help coordinate all the partners. So essentially, there was a team that coordinated the collaboration among the partners. We also had a grant analyst position to keep track of things. We would write grants together. We would try not to compete at all, because we did not want any of our partners to lose any of their fundings. So we found out exactly what was their, I call it holy money. We created our own foundation to try to find new funders who had never given to this cause before. We brought in human trafficking back then. I mean, at that time, everybody was asking us, why are you addressing human trafficking in 2002? I think now everybody realizes why we do it and why we probably should have done more. We had crime victims on site, so we can give immediate emergency financial assistance to survivors, so they didn't have to go fill out those forms. We had at that time the President's Initiative, because after this was launched, our president, President Bush at that time, put $20 million to the President Initiative. So that's something that we are all proud of, because that was part of our journey. We ended up opening up 15 centers within a 2-year period as part of that, small, medium, and large, to try to see, can it work in smaller jurisdictions, not just a big city like the city of San Diego. So you will see that. Camp Hope was Casey's part of the original vision, that if we were going to address domestic violence, we needed to address it in 2 ends: immediate crisis, long-term commitment, and also trying to break the cycle with Camp Hope. And then we created Teen Court. I see here you also have a teen program, and doing that as early as you possibly can, it was helpful. So Teen Court was on site. We created a survivors group from the very beginning to help us address a lot of the issues, educating our staff, talking to the media, talking to other survivors. So I know you have a Voices Committee here as well, which is very exciting to see. We had a huge training room, because the San Diego Family Justice Center became the place to hang out. It was like our pub. It's like everybody's going to come to our pub, because that's where everything was happening. And then we had the law enforcement floor, government floor, and the police department committed their entire unit there. You'll see a photograph of them in uniform, but that was only when the police chief was there. On any other given day, they got to wear whatever they wanted to wear. So they got to wear Hawaiian shirts, a polo shirt. What we realized is that we needed to make victims more comfortable. And then we're not going to be as comfortable if you're wearing your suit and 15 pounds of equipment, including a firearm. Sergeant Robert Keach was our gift. He was assigned by the police department to help us create operations, and he took care of day-to-day security. Our elder abuse investigations unit was assigned to the Family Justice Center, and they dealt with financial and physical abuse. We had the probation department on site, so we could quickly intervene anytime someone reoffended. So they could act much quicker sometimes, and they had a direct link to the court. We had military services on site, because in San Diego we had the Navy, we have the Marines, and so they were a key partner. And then our 5th floor, because our unit was so big, we had the prosecution floor, and there we had the entire unit. And then ultimately they started to create teams. They created teams within the city that was made up of advocates, social workers, probation officers, police officers, and prosecutors. And we started for the very first time to work as a high-risk team for our community and identify the most high-risk offenders. The district attorney's office brought in their team. And in the United States, we have a different process between different prosecutors. We also brought in art. to try to use art as a way of healing. So when you go from hurt to hope, that was part of our journey. And then we had a lot of partners because we filled up very quickly. So one of the recommendations we make to others is whatever size you think you need, triple it in advance because we ran out of room. So the fire department was a crucial partner. One of the ideas that we had is that they were going to learn, the paramedics, about strangulation, domestic violence, and the Family Justice Center. If they knew about domestic violence and the services, because a lot of times the fire department or the paramedics are going to scenes before the police are involved. And so if they would know more about the services, it would be easier. So they would come and visit us. Here's a list of all of our 20 off-site partners that we weren't able to include them in our first go-around. And then how did it work? And I'm going to quickly go through that. So you check in, and now what we're doing is working on a centralized system where we're going to be able to help all of our family justice centers. It's going to be an intake where we can manage all of the partners, manage the clients. It's going to go through every kind of legal requirement, but the goal is to provide services as quickly as possible. So in other words, we'll even have an alarm. When did Gail check in? What services does she need? How long has she been waiting? And if I'm waiting for more than 15 minutes, somebody's going to come out and say, Gail, don't worry. We haven't forgotten about you, but this is what we can do. And then it's also going to help measure our success. To keep going, we have the clinical screening, as I mentioned before, but today it looks very different. Today we have learned about polyvictimization and how to really ask victims about everything they have dealt with. And Casey will mention some of the successes about polyvictimization, where we were in the intake then and where we are now. And then the service delivery, as what we were trying to do is provide services on site to also welcome any person who walked in the door. So appointments are not necessary. We figured out if the airport can do it, with planes coming in and planes going out, that we should be able to figure this out as how to provide services. And our model at that time was the spa. Because if you think about it, when you go to the spa, it's beautiful, it's relaxing. There's about 20-some people there. They get their services on time. They get to pick their services, male or female, masseuse, and it goes on. So that was our model. Then after we provide those services, we also wanted to make sure that we could learn. Did you get all the services that you wanted today and needed today? What can we do to support you? How are we going to help you? And also, is it safe to follow up? Just to make sure, and what can we do to improve? So immediately we started to ask for feedback, and they gave it to us. And then you can see here what we discovered in that process of asking for feedback and doing risk assessments is that many of our victims were at high risk. So we developed informal high-risk teams on the spot to address some situations. Because there were times when victims would come in, but they needed to go to a shelter that night. So on any given day, we had 1 to 3 victims going to a shelter as opposed to going back home because we determined their level of risk was extremely high. And then, of course, I'll probably just ask Casey to come back and we'll wrap it up very quickly. Oprah found out about the Family Justice Center. I don't know about you, but when Oprah says like something might be a good idea, I think the whole world listens. And here's my sneaking suspicion. President Bush watched Oprah when Oprah was talking about the San Diego Family Justice Center, and President Bush stole the idea from Oprah. But I'll let Casey tell the rest of the story, and then we'll wrap up and shave a few more minutes. Thank you.